Just wait a moment. There's a stain here, so I'll clean it up. What? At the sudden, incomprehensible words, I turned around and something cold hit my face, and I fell to the ground. The moss green party dress I was wearing slowly started to stain. What's happening? Water and flowers. Looking up, my sister-in-law, wearing a stunning dress, was holding a decorated vase. Water was dripping from the mouth of the vase. A dirty sister-in-law, like you can become clean with this. My sister-in-law, seeming to enjoy herself deeply, had a mean and ugly smile on her face. My name is Kate, and I am 35 years old. While keeping the household, I also work in caregiving. My husband, who is the same age as me, was a high school classmate, and we hit it off after reuniting at a reunion. Starting as friends, after his proposal, we began dating and smoothly moved on to marriage. We don't have children, but we lead a fulfilling life. However, the relationship with my in-laws is not very good. For some reason, from the beginning of our marriage, I have been continuously antagonized by my younger sister-in-law, Susan. Don't touch anything with those hands that have been taking care of drooling elderly people. It's dirty. You do dirty jobs, and your income is less than half of mine. That's the price you pay for neglecting your studies. I have often been told such things since I got married. The caregiving job does indeed get dirty often, and the low pay does not match the hard labor. However, the job brings a sense of fulfillment, and there are many joys in the relationships with the service users and their families. There is something recent I remember. Before getting married, there was a very kind and friendly elderly woman with advancing dementia at a facility where I work. Everyone at the facility affectionately called her Mary, but she suddenly passed away from old age. Later, when her family came to pick up her belongings, they told me this. Before we asked this facility for help, honestly, the whole family was at their limit. My elderly grandmother had even forgotten about me, whom she once cherished and needed care. But since we started getting help here, the family has had more breathing room, and the feeling of cherishing our mother like before has returned. It is thanks to all of you that we could continue to love our grandmother to the end. I am grateful to you. Thank you. When the granddaughter and the rest of the family told me this, I also found myself crying. At that time, I was questioning whether caregiving was the right job for me, and I had even thought about quitting several times. However, that one comment validated all my efforts and motivated me to continue working. Thanks to such precious experiences, I now feel proud of my profession. Despite this, it was very unpleasant to be criticized by my sister-in-law Susan, who seemed to have no understanding of caregiving. Do you even realize how rude you are right now? She works hard every day for her family. Someone like you, who doesn't even have a family, has no right to mock her. Fortunately, every time Susan criticized me, my husband always stood by my side, but each time she would sulk and retort unhappily. Hey brother, trying hard is only good for children. Besides, thinking about having someone who has touched the excrement of other elderly people cook for me makes me feel sick. After all, caregiving is something that anyone will experience as their parents age. It's laughable that you call such a normal thing a profession and take pride in it. My husband and I were very puzzled by Susan's words and could only be amazed. Seeing that his parents did not say anything, my husband believed they truly thought, she is right because she performed better in school than us, who only graduated from high school. My husband raised the issue several times, but his parents seemed to not respond at all. Originally, Susan was the youngest child born into the family and was clever and beautiful from a young age, so she was much loved by everyone around her. When Susan graduated from a prestigious university and was hired by a multinational company, she became the most respected person in the family. Her parents were those who prioritized Susan first. Now, Susan's words are always prioritized, and the only one who can speak up to her is her older brother, my husband. However, the words of a brother who went to an ordinary university and works for a small to medium-sized company seemed to go in one ear and out the other for her. My in-laws' home was not a comfortable place for either my husband or me, but we decided to keep our visits to a few times a year and maintain a reasonable relationship. Regardless of the situation at my in-laws' place, the relationship between my husband and me is very good. And just as I love my husband, he also treats me with utmost care. For me, my husband is the ideal partner. One day, we received unexpected news. It turns out that my sister-in-law, Susan, is getting married. Moreover, she wants to wear a wedding dress before she turns 30, and it seems that the wedding and reception are planned to be held soon. According to her parents, her future husband is a wonderful young man who works at the city hall. Furthermore, his parents are civil servants who own a home in New York, and he has an older brother who is already married. Indeed, he has impeccable qualifications as a spouse. Having no risk of layoffs and owning a home in New York implies a certain level of wealth. I am impressed by his perfection. Although we were surprised by this sudden happy news, we decided to wholeheartedly congratulate them. And then, the day of the wedding arrived quickly. The weather was perfectly clear and refreshingly beautiful. It had been a long time since we attended a wedding, and the venue was a luxurious hotel, so I put on makeup more carefully than usual, dressed in a moss green dress, and posed for my husband. How do I look? Do I look beautiful? Yes, very beautiful. Smiling at his response, I felt my face light up with joy. In the end, I had never met her fiancé before, and today would be our first meeting. Although he is Susan's fiancé, I couldn't help but feel something. But today is a special day for them, and I truly wanted to bless them. At that moment, my husband's smartphone vibrated. Hello, yes, I understand. What, really? Okay, I'm on my way now. Suddenly, he hung up the phone and, looking hurried, shouted, We have to hurry. The family introduction is starting soon. What? I checked the invitation again. Looking back, we had also sent a separate note asking our relatives to come early to our own wedding. Despite this, there was no such information included this time. I recalled Susan's mischievous smile. When we hurried to the hotel, the family introduction had already finished, and everyone was freely mingling. Many other guests were present, and the hall was crowded. We rushed to my in-laws, who looked displeased. When we apologized, my father-in-law glared at us with sharp eyes. How could you be late on such an important day? What were you thinking? I'm sorry we were late. However, we were not instructed to come early. Look, here it is. My husband showed the invitation, and my father-in-law shook his head. There's no way she would make such a mistake. You must have overlooked something. My husband was at a loss for words, and my mother-in-law, dressed in a black formal dress, said quietly, Someone will explain later, so make sure to greet everyone again before the reception starts, to avoid embarrassing her. My husband probably did not want to cause any more trouble at this joyous event. He seemed to accept my mother-in-law's words reluctantly. We both felt a bit uneasy. Maybe we should go to the bathroom first. Yes, that's a good idea. I agreed with my husband's suggestion. Our hair was messy because we had rushed. To reset our mood, we went to the bathroom, and on our way back, I saw Susan in her wedding dress. Susan, I came full of a desire to congratulate her, but in this state, it didn't seem like I could genuinely enjoy the ceremony. I couldn't help but call out to her. Clearly annoyed, she looked at me and responded curtly, Why did you come? What does that mean? I received an invitation and informed them of my attendance, so it's natural that I came. Her incomprehensible question made me forget what I wanted to ask. Her eyes, staring at me in the deserted hallway, seemed to be judging me, like casting pearls before swine. A luxurious hotel and a sister-in-law. It's just out of place. I couldn't understand what she meant. I was dressed appropriately for the occasion, and though I had been a bit disheveled earlier, I had since fixed myself up. Looking around, I didn't feel out of place at all, Susan continued. I thought people like you, who work in low-paid caregiving, would be too embarrassed to come here. Or did you just show up because you rarely get to visit such places? Her words were irritating, but I couldn't cause a scene here, so I suppressed my anger out of consideration for my husband. I always wonder, why do you speak like that? I'm here because I was invited, and I genuinely want to convey my congratulations. Also, many of the guests are elderly. Such remarks are not appropriate. Are you trying to say something to me? Despite my calm response, Susan frowned in displeasure. You married an ordinary husband, have no children, and you're satisfied with a low-paying, dirty job, yet you dare to lecture me. That's a joke. She was the one actually mocking people. I felt my blood boil. Just as I was about to retort, my husband called me from behind. When I realized what was happening and came back to my senses, she sneered through her nose. Today is my special day. Please avoid any unnecessary trouble. Saying that, she left accompanied by the staff. My husband approached me with concern. Are you okay? What happened? It's always like this. Don't worry. It's not a big deal. Despite trying to stay calm, my voice trembled. My husband seemed to sense something and silently hugged me. Honestly, I have lost interest in Susan's wedding. However, if I make a scene now, it will inconvenience many people, excluding Susan. So I decided to restrain myself today. Swallowing all the words I wanted to say, I quietly attended the ceremony under my husband's protection. I couldn't muster any feelings of celebration. I just bowed my head and waited for the time to pass. Since I had paid a substantial gift of money, I decided to at least make the most of the meal. After the ceremony, as we were heading to the reception venue, a staff member suddenly stopped me. The bride has requested to speak with you. She says she has something to tell her sister-in-law. Confused about what it could be, but knowing I must go if it was the bride's request, I told my husband and headed to the dressing room. In the dressing room, Susan, having just changed her outfit, was adjusting her accessories. "Can we have a moment alone, please?" "Yes, but the reception is about to start soon, so not for long." "I know. Just leave us alone quickly." Intimidated by Susan's raised voice, the staff hesitantly left the dressing room. What on earth does she intend? Grumbling, Susan reapplied her lipstick and looked at me sharply. "Do you understand why I called you here?" "No, I don't." "Do I really need to spell it out?" "This is why low education is such a problem." "What exactly do you want to tell me?" "Called there only to be insulted," I asked while suppressing my irritation. "If you don't understand, I'll make it clear I've explained things to everyone. And I want you to leave now." "What?" Startled by Susan's unexpected demand, I was at a loss for words. Susan continued to be upset. "You've already come, so I'll allow you to attend. But I never expected you to stay for the reception. That's really brazen. You really are clueless." Susan's mocking laughter was as grating as ever, but I also felt a desire to leave. A direct refusal would mean no later blame from my in-laws. "It's a shame I won't enjoy the reception meal. But it's far better than spending it with a fake smile." "Understood." With that decision made, I reached for my phone to contact my husband and was about to leave when she spoke. "Just wait a moment. There's a stain here, so I'll clean it up." "What?" At the sudden baffling words, I turned around and something cold hit my face and I fell to the ground. The moss green party dress I was wearing slowly started to stain. "What's happening?" "Water and flowers." Looking up, Susan, in a stunning dress, was holding a decorated vase. Water was dripping from the vase and Susan had a malicious smile. "A dirty sister-in-law like you can become clean with this. The flowers are just for charm. Just adding a little beauty to your plain face. No thanks needed." Susan seemed genuinely pleased as she said this and reached for the intercom. "Oh, sorry. My sister-in-law tripped and knocked over the vase. I have to attend the reception. Can you take care of the cleanup?" Susan then immediately threw the vase at me. The vase rolled on the floor and stopped at my feet. Unlike the previous sarcasm and insults, this direct action was a first, and I was stunned. "I feel much better now. I'll say it again. Don't come to the reception. Go back alone. It would be a nuisance to see you there." Now I finally understood. Usually because my husband and in-laws are around, she couldn't take such actions. In this state, it would be foolish to go to the reception, and I might not even be able to get on the train for my return. Seeing me despondent, Susan smirked triumphantly. As I gritted my teeth, I heard someone running towards the door. Suddenly, the door opened, and the situation changed dramatically. "What are you doing to her?" The man standing in front of me wasn't staff but appeared to be the out-of-breath groom, holding a vivid red bouquet of roses. Nothing. She fell over by herself and got doused with the vase water." Susan answered calmly, then glanced at the bouquet, unable to hide her delight, and exclaimed, "Wow, bright red roses. Beautiful. Is this a surprise?" "Yes, I'm so happy. I told you I was wearing a red dress. Let's go to the reception." "She's fine. I've already informed the staff, so it doesn't concern us." "It doesn't concern us." The groom glanced briefly at Susan's arm wrapped around his, then shook her off. He then walked over to me, pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket, and offered it. "Please use this." "Thank you." As I accepted the handkerchief, I checked the time, and the reception was about to start. "I'm fine. Please go ahead to the reception. While I don't care for Susan, the groom and other guests are innocent. I don't want to cause them any trouble because of me. Let's go. Don't worry about her." "Sister-in-law, didn't Susan just say it doesn't concern her?" My hesitant reaction probably let something slip. Susan stood frozen, a look of realization on her face. Behind her, the groom smiled at me. "You are a special benefactor, especially as my sister-in-law." "What do you mean?" Both Susan's and my voices of surprise echoed at the same time. "A benefactor? What is he talking about?" I was supposed to meet this groom for the first time today. As I looked at his face, I recalled the past and finally made the connection. By any chance, are you related to Chloe Miller, whose family I cared for at the facility where I used to work?" "Yes, that's right. You really helped us out back then." Indeed, he was from the family of Chloe Miller, who had once told me as a caregiver, "I'm glad I met you. It turns out that my fiancé's sister-in-law is the caregiver who helped us back then." At that time, I only knew her by her last name, and all I heard from her was that she had a brother who was married. What, you knew each other? And what do you mean by benefactor? Isn't your grandma long gone by now? Susan was unable to grasp the situation and looked confused. That's right. Just before our grandmother passed away, your sister-in-law was the one who cared for her in our family's place. Susan averted her eyes at this unexpected connection. After a moment of silence, Susan forced a smile at the groom and said, "Oh, I see. Anyway, let's go to the reception. Everyone is waiting." "But what about her?" "Look, leave her to the staff. You know, she really is so careless. She came to celebrate but ended up tripping and getting all wet." I was simply astonished at how boldly Susan could lie. As I wiped my body with a towel handed to me by the staff, he looked at Susan with disbelief and said, "I didn't realize you were that kind of person." "What?" Leaving a puzzled Susan behind, the groom picked up an object that looked like a hardcover book sitting on the windowsill. It looked like a bookcase, but when opened, a hidden camera appeared. "What is that? Were you secretly filming?" I apologize for having the camera on. We rushed the wedding so much that there wasn't time for a proper proposal, so I planned a surprise proposal during the reception. While Susan stood speechless in shock, the groom quietly continued his explanation. "The plan was like this: after you changed outfits, I would go to the dressing room where you were resting alone, propose again in a private setting, and after getting your response, carry you to the reception hall. The whole scene was to be filmed and shown live at the venue as a surprise." Shown live. Susan's complexion turned visibly pale. I had to cancel the live feed to the venue due to an unexpected visitor, but I saw everything. "I saw all your actions." The groom briefly glanced at me, then added sarcastically, "I never imagined such a surprise would occur." Susan couldn't stop shaking. Her face was a mix of anger and panic. "You made various excuses to prevent me from meeting your brother and sister-in-law. But today the true reason became clear. To you, academic credentials and appearances are everything, but you said the same thing. That's smart. Beautiful people should be valued. You're misunderstanding something. What I said was that anyone who works hard in their studies' appearance, or whatever it may be, deserves recognition. That doesn't mean they should look down on others." As the groom coldly responded, Susan was at a loss for words. Ignoring the bouquet of roses on the floor, the groom spoke to Susan in a calm voice. "I can't cancel the reception, but we'll discuss what happens next later." As the groom left, Susan collapsed to her knees in shock. Then, she turned a fierce gaze on me. "This is the worst. You've ruined the wedding because of your low education and plain looks. I'm going to sue you." Seeing Susan reveal her true nature and start screaming, I was surprisingly calm in my response. "Even if you say you'll sue, I think the outcome would be unfavorable for you. But if you're okay with that, why not try?" "What are you talking about? It's the truth. You were the one who threw the water and lied, and all of it is recorded on video. You ruined the ceremony with your own actions." Susan didn't expect me to fight back so strongly and was left speechless, her anger clearly visible on her face. "Shut up, I hate you. Just disappear." Susan's voice was filled with rage, and her fury controlled her. She hastily picked up the bouquet that had fallen to the floor and threw it at me with all her might. As I closed the door, the sound of the bouquet scattering on the floor echoed, along with her angry screams throughout the venue. Soon after, my husband and in-laws hurried over in response to the staff's call. Seeing me drenched, my husband immediately rushed over and checked on me with concern. Meanwhile, my parents-in-law merely glanced at me, unable to hide their anxiety and confusion at their daughter's tantrum. When the groom played the video he had prepared, in response to the demand to know what had happened, my parents-in-law were speechless, and my husband could hardly contain his anger. Her actions were clearly excessive. If I had known this would happen, I should have kept her at a distance from the start. "I'm really sorry you had to go through this." "It's okay, I managed to speak up for myself too." That helped me feel a bit better. I tried to calm my husband. While his parents were still wondering what to do next, I quietly spoke to them. "I don't have a change of clothes, and staying here won't let her calm down. I'll be leaving now." At this, they showed a momentary relief and said, "All right, leave this matter to us. It would help if you could go back as soon as possible. Today's main character is our daughter. You'll forgive her, won't you?" They replied. I sighed slightly at their words, understanding their parental heart, yet prepared to leave. At that moment, my husband gently embraced my shoulders and firmly addressed his family. He declared boldly in front of them, "I cannot allow my wife to continue being treated this way. I'm truly sorry, but we will need to keep some distance moving forward. I hope everyone here has a long and happy life." This sudden declaration left his parents shocked and utterly speechless. Afterward, we quietly left the venue while holding each other's hands. The planned reception did start, but was delayed by several minutes and eventually had to be cancelled due to beer, unsettling and frantic behavior. At the scene, the groom announced their divorce, and Susan found herself single again just a month after getting married. I heard that she blamed the entire series of failures on me, but all of it was the result of her own actions, and I felt no sympathy for her situation. It seemed that the consequences of her past behaviors had finally come back to haunt her. After cutting ties with my in-laws, one day, I asked my husband if he felt lonely being away from his biological family, to which he immediately responded with a bright smile. "What are you talking about? I have you, and we're going to have more family members soon." As he said this, he lovingly stroked my belly. "We're going to build a warm home for this child." His gaze was tenderly fixed on me and the new life growing inside me, his expression as warm as a gentle patch of sunlight. I wholeheartedly wish for a happy future together with him. That day, in a dorm room at Berkeley, I felt true despair for the first time in my life. "I'm sorry, but if the payment cannot be confirmed, you'll need to vacate by next weekend." As I read the email from the dorm administration office, my hands were trembling. The words on the screen seemed to dance, mocking me. Though it was already past mid-September and the campus was filled with the energy of a new semester, my heart felt as cold as ice. My name is Felicia Lee. Born to a Chinese-American father and a Japanese-American mother, I'm the quintessential model student of Asian-American descent. At least, that's how it's been until now. Outside the window, the evening sky was tinted red. A breeze from the San Francisco Bay gently swayed the eucalyptus trees. I could hear the voices of freshmen passing by, laughing and chatting without a care. Their carefree laughter pierced me like needles. 3 weeks ago, I was filled with hope. Acceptance to UC Berkeley with a full scholarship was the reward for 12 years of relentless effort. My parents proudly saw me off at the dorm, and my father, unusually emotional, shed a tear and told me, "You did great." But now, that hope was beginning to crumble. The scholarship check that the university had supposedly sent to my parents. I wanted to believe my father's words. "I'll handle it soon." But my anxiety only grew by the day. I dialed my father's number again. With each ring, I felt my heartbeat quicken. On the 4th ring, my father finally answered, "Felicia? What's up?" His voice didn't carry its usual cheerfulness. "Dad, about the dorm fees." My voice had unintentionally dropped to a whisper. "Oh, that, don't worry. Just wait a little longer." Before my father could continue, I gathered the courage to speak up. "But they're already asking me to leave. If I don't pay by next week." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Outside the window, the evening sky grew darker and darker. When my father finally spoke, his voice was nothing like the one I knew. "Felicia, there's something I need to tell you." This was the beginning of a conversation that would change my life forever. "I used your scholarship money." My father's voice sounded as if it was coming from far away. My mind went blank, and a ringing began in my ears. "Used? What do you mean?" My voice sounded as if it belonged to someone else. My father let out a long sigh. The explanation that followed was like a nightmare. A layoff, mounting debt, the urgent need to pay rent, and the fact that he had temporarily used my $99,000 scholarship fund. I intended to return it soon. There was a new job opportunity. His words had lost all the conviction they once held. In my mind, memories flashed by like a slideshow. When he suddenly quit his job when I was in elementary school, the abrupt move in middle school, the collection notices that arrived almost monthly during high school, and the intense argument when my sister Hannah left home. It was all connected. Maybe I had deliberately looked away until now. It was. For the family. My father's voice trembled. At that moment, the emotions I had been holding back all burst out at once. "For the family? You ruined my life, and that's for the family." I was surprised by my own raised voice. I had never once raised my voice at my father before. Felicia, calm down. Your father is. My mother's voice broke in over the phone. She must have been beside him. Are you defending him too, Mom? My voice was shaking beyond control. Your father has worked so hard for all of us. Enough. I hung up. It was my first act of rebellion. A deep silence settled over my dorm room. Outside the window, the sun had completely set, and only the streetlights cast lonely beams of light. On my desk, the computer screen still displayed the eviction notice email. Classes start tomorrow. There are report deadlines too, but all of that felt like events in a distant world. I collapsed onto my bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about my life up to this point. The days spent trying to meet my parents' expectations as a model student, not understanding why Hannah chose to leave when she did. Everything was beginning to look different. My phone kept vibrating. It was my father calling, but I no longer had the strength to answer. That night, for the first time, I began to seriously think about what family really meant. Even as the night deepened, I couldn't sleep. Missed calls on my phone had surpassed 30, and messages from my father had exceeded 100. But I couldn't bring myself to open any of them. Around 2 a.m., an unexpected call came in. The name Hannah appeared on the screen. It was the first contact from my sister in 2 years. Without hesitation, I answered. Felicia, are you okay? Hannah's voice lacked its usual sharpness. Hannah, why? I struggled to hold back my tears. I heard from Dad. He sounded desperate. Hannah spoke quietly. Then, she began to tell me her own story. An event from 4 years ago, when Hannah was in her second year of college. Dad had secretly opened a credit card in her name, amassing a large debt. As a result, she had no choice but to drop out of college. This is the real reason I left home. There was a painful edge of an old wound in Hannah's voice. But, why didn't you tell me until now? After a long silence, Hannah replied to my question. I didn't want to hurt you. And, you seem to get along well with Dad and Mom, unlike me. I gave a bitter smile at her words. Get along well. Or had I just been looking away? I don't know what to do. At last, the deep-seated anxiety in my heart found words. First, you need to protect yourself. Hannah's voice was strong and filled with conviction. But, Felicia, listen. Loving your family and protecting yourself are two different things. Your father's problems are his problems. You have to live your own life. That night, Hannah gave me practical advice. Consulting the university's financial aid office, applying for emergency assistance, and finding part-time work. And most importantly, the importance of emotional support. Use the counseling services too. I regret not using them back then. We talked until almost dawn. It might have been our first real conversation as sisters. As the sun began to rise, I had made up my mind. I deleted all the missed calls and messages from my father without reading them. Instead, I began making a list of things to do that day. Scheduling an appointment with the financial aid office, applying for counseling services, checking campus job listings, adjusting my class schedule. My reflection on the screen looked a little different. Though dark circles shadowed my eyes, there was a new determination in my expression. Arriving 30 minutes early for my appointment, I sat on the hard hallway chair and reviewed my documents. Felicia, please come in. Mr. George was a kindly-looking man in his mid-50s. Suppressing the tremble in my voice, I began explaining my situation. The misappropriation of my scholarship by my father, the eviction notice from the dorm, and my current predicament. As I spoke, I felt my voice falter more than once. He listened intently to my story. In his gaze, I sensed not only sympathy but also a deep understanding. Unfortunately, cases like this aren't uncommon, he said quietly. Not uncommon. Yes, especially as a form of financial abuse. I caught my breath at those words. Abuse. That word had never once crossed my mind before. But my father said it was for the family. Felicia. He spoke gently, but firmly. Using funds intended for your future without your consent cannot be justified under any circumstances. This is clearly financial abuse. At that moment, I felt something crumble inside me. The persona of the understanding daughter I had struggled to maintain shattered with an audible break. Then, what should I do? First, let me explain the legal options available to you. He pulled out a series of documents. You could report this to the police. This essentially constitutes fraud. I quickly shook my head. I can't do that. He nodded in understanding. Many students say the same. In that case, let's look at other options. For the next hour, we discussed various support programs. Emergency student aid funds, temporary scholarships, campus work programs. There were more possibilities than I had imagined. However, he added, to receive these forms of support, there is one condition. A condition? Yes, you will need to regularly utilize the university's counseling services. In situations like this, I believe that mental support is essential. His words left me feeling a bit hesitant. Counseling. I had always held a bias, thinking it was only for people with problems. But recalling what I had experienced in the past 24 hours, I felt I could no longer afford to hold on to that prejudice. All right. I nodded slightly. As I left the office, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. There was no concrete solution yet, but at least I felt reassured that I wasn't alone. My footsteps echoed loudly in the hallway. The waiting room of the counseling center was surprisingly comfortable. Soft-colored walls, potted plants, and afternoon light streaming in through the windows. Felicia, thank you for waiting. Dr. Park, a Korean-American woman in her late 30s, greeted me with a warm smile. Her office had a large bookshelf and a comfortable-looking sofa. So, where would you like to start today? There was a calming quality to her voice. Honestly, I'm not sure where to begin. I continued, searching for the right words. My father using up my scholarship? My mother's attitude? Or maybe reconciling with my sister? Let's start with whatever you most want to talk about. I couldn't help but give a small, wry smile at her words. The thing I most wanted to talk about. I realized, in truth, I wasn't entirely sure myself. I'm angry. Unexpected words slipped out of my mouth. At whom? At my father. No, at my mother too. And I took a deep breath. At myself. At yourself as well? Yes, for not realizing it sooner, for not trying to understand Hannah's feelings when she left home. Tears began to trail down my cheeks. Before I knew it, I was speaking nonstop. The discomfort I had felt in my family since I was young, my father's sudden job changes and moves, the growing debts, and how I had tried to convince myself that all of it was normal. You were just trying to protect your family. Dr. Park's gentle voice echoed softly. But in the end, I became an accomplice. By believing my father's lies, I helped create this situation. That's not true. She spoke quietly but firmly. You are a victim. Children don't need to take responsibility for their parents' actions. At those words, I felt something inside me start to crumble. The guilt I had carried for years, the self-blame, and the inexplicable anxiety. I could feel them slowly beginning to take on a different shape. Then, what should I do from now on? One step at a time, you can start reclaiming your life. Dr. Park pointed to the calendar on her desk. First, let's set some specific goals. From that day, my new life began. After doing some research, I found that the campus dining hall was hiring part-time workers, so I immediately went for an interview. I was hired that same day and was asked to start the next day. My first day on the job was more challenging than I had imagined. Starting work at 5 a.m., washing dishes, preparing ingredients, serving customers tasks I wasn't used to. There was hardly a moment to rest until my evening classes. "Felicia, could you handle these vegetables too?" The kitchen manager, Kelly, gave me instructions kindly even amidst the busyness. At the end of the day, I returned to my dorm completely exhausted. My hands were pruned, my arms felt heavy, and my legs were like lead. Yet, strangely enough, my heart felt a bit lighter. I started something on my own. That small sense of accomplishment was what kept me going. Meeting Julie, who worked the same shift, also became a major turning point. She was a 35-year-old single mother studying in the evening program while raising 2 children. "Felicia, would you mind if I listened to your story?" During a break one day, she asked me that. Though hesitant, I shared the events of the past few weeks. My father's betrayal, my mother's attitude, and my current struggles. "I've been through something similar." Julie spoke quietly. "My ex-husband used up my savings, and there was a time we almost ended up on the streets with my kids. Her experience gave me a new perspective. She had overcome her crisis and built a new life. That became a source of great hope for me. Meanwhile, the pressure from my father continued. I was deleting his emails and calls without reading them, but now he started reaching out through relatives. 'Your father is hinting at suicide.' My hands shook as I read the message from my aunt. Panicking, I contacted Hannah, who responded calmly, 'This is another one of his usual tactics. He did the same with me. Don't fall for his emotional manipulation.' I also discussed this matter in my counseling sessions. You are not responsible for your father's life." Dr. Park's words left a deep impression on my heart. One evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was my mother. When I saw her standing outside the dining hall where I worked, like a small shadow, I could hardly believe my eyes. Her usually neat appearance was a bit disheveled, and her complexion was pale. "Felicia, can we talk for a moment?" Her voice was faint and trembling. After my shift ended, we sat on a bench on campus. The cold October wind carried the silence between us. "Your father." She began to speak, carefully choosing her words. "His mental state is deteriorating." It was an unexpected revelation. She explained that he was being hounded by debt collectors, unable to sleep at night, and that his guilt over what he'd done to me had plunged him into deep depression. "That's why he wants to see you. You want me to let him apologize?" My voice turned cold without thinking. My mother shook her head slightly. "No, I wanted to apologize." Her unexpected words made me look at her face. "I've always followed your father's lead, and I couldn't protect you both. I lost Hannah, and now I might be losing you too." Tears began to spill from my mother's eyes. "I've also started going to counseling. I learned the term, codependency." At that moment, my mother looked different. She was not just the perfect wife and mother she had tried so hard to be, she was a woman who had suffered. But it might be too late. She took a piece of paper out of her handbag. "I'm considering a divorce." Her confession brought a flood of complex emotions: relief, anxiety, and hope. My mother was finally trying to reclaim her own life. I felt a quiet sense of awe at her courage. "It's not too late." I surprised myself with the words that slipped out. "It's never too late to start." My mother smiled through her tears. In her expression, I saw a light I hadn't seen in years. A week after my conversation with my mother, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I felt a strange sense of foreboding and answered. "Is this Felicia? This is Central Hospital." It was news that my father had been rushed to the hospital. A suicide attempt due to an overdose. When I arrived at the hospital, my mother and Hannah were already waiting in the lobby. I was a bit surprised to see Hannah. She had completely cut ties with our father. "I felt I needed to be here," she said quietly. We received an explanation from the doctor in front of the ICU. While my father's condition was stable, he would require treatment in a psychiatric ward. Then, a surprising fact was revealed. My father had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder several years ago. However, he had abandoned treatment and stopped his medication on his own. "Why didn't you tell us?" When I asked my mother, she answered with a weary expression, "Your father told me not to, especially not to tell you both." At that moment, many pieces connected. The sudden job changes, impulsive investments, and extreme mood swings. All of it had been part of his struggle with his illness. But that doesn't excuse it. Hannah's voice was calm. An illness is not a reason to hurt others. We spent a long time discussing everything in the hospital cafeteria. My father's treatment, our future plans, and each of our own lives. "Maybe we were all victims," my mother murmured. "But that ends here." That night, as I returned to my dorm, I was deep in thought. My father's illness might explain some of his actions, but it is not a reason for me to give up on my own life. In my counseling session the next day, Dr. Park offered a new perspective. Understanding and forgiving are different things, and there's no need to rush either. About a month after my father's hospitalization, my life began to shift little by little. Working at the dining hall had unexpectedly helped me grow. My friendship with Julie has become a great support. "Hey Felicia, this weekend, I'm taking the kids to the park for a picnic. Want to join us?" Spending weekends with Julie and her family had become part of my routine. Her invitations showed me a new form of family. That afternoon, we had a wonderful time at San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Julie's children, 8-year-old Anne and 6-year-old Emilio, affectionately called me Auntie Felicia. "Raising kids alone must have been tough, right?" When I asked, Julie smiled. "Yes, but people who aren't related by blood supported me in unexpected ways. I learned that family isn't always about blood ties." Her words deeply resonated with me. My father's treatment was progressing. He was participating in a comprehensive program combining medication for bipolar disorder with psychotherapy, and he seemed to be gradually stabilizing. "Would you come to visit me?" As I looked at my father's message, I pondered for a long time. When I consulted Hannah, she made an unexpected suggestion. "Let's go together." In the hospital's visiting room, we faced each other as a family for the first time in 3 years. My father looked surprisingly small. "I'm so sorry to both of you." His voice had lost the authority it once held. "I've done something I can't take back, especially to you, Hannah." "Dad." Hannah spoke quietly. "We're not going to talk about what happened back then. What matters is what we do from here on." Those words hinted at the beginning of a new relationship, neither blame nor forgiveness. As the winter term began, new changes were unfolding in my life. Through the university's financial aid office, I was hired as an intern for a financial literacy education program. It's a 15-hour-per-week job where I provide financial education to other students. "Your experience will be incredibly valuable," George said, recommending me for the position. My mother moved into a new apartment and started a part-time job. One day she spoke to me with excitement. "I've decided to take an evening accounting course starting next week." The divorce process was also underway, but she now appeared calmer and more peaceful than before. After his discharge, my father began living in a small group home. He's gradually trying to regain his daily life, continuing with regular checkups and medication management. "I've created a debt repayment plan," he explained to us with a sincere expression. "It will take time, but I'll pay back every penny." Hannah had begun establishing a support organization for victims of financial abuse. I started to get involved little by little in her work. "This is something only we can do," she said, encouraging me. And there was an unexpected encounter as well. I met Thomas, a fellow from the financial literacy program. He, too, grew up in a family with a father struggling with alcoholism. By sharing our experiences, a deep understanding began to form. Don't give up on loving someone just because you're afraid of getting hurt. His words resonate deeply within me. In my sessions with Dr. Park, I am working on new challenges. Accepting the past and creating the future are processes that happen simultaneously. As spring approached, a new atmosphere started to flow through the campus. The experiences from my internship revealed new possibilities to me. My interactions with students facing financial difficulties held a profound significance. Your story truly resonates with me, Felicia. When a student told me this, I felt how my experiences could be of help to others. My relationship with Thomas also deepened. Our time together gave me a chance to re-evaluate family issues. You've become stronger. After finishing our study session at the library, as we walked across campus at dusk, Thomas said this: "More than becoming stronger." I searched for the right words. Maybe I'm finally able to be myself. Around that time, my father started attending group therapy sessions regularly and was gradually showing changes. "I've been running away from facing my illness," he confessed quietly. But in doing so, I ended up hurting the people I cared about. My mother completed her accounting course and began working part-time at a small accounting office. For the first time, I feel like I'm living my own life. There was a new sparkle in her eyes. Hannah's support organization was gradually expanding. On weekends, I have started working as an advisor as well. Our experiences can become someone's hope. Hannah's words held a sense of certainty. One day, 6 months before graduation, something unexpected happened. "Felicia, do you have a moment?" George from the financial aid office called me in, which was unusual. "A major investment bank on Wall Street has inquired about hiring you. They seem to highly value your accomplishments in the financial literacy education program." That news opened a new door to my future. But it also presented me with a big decision. Hannah's organization was planning to open a branch in New York, and she had invited me to join her. "What do you think I should do?" When I consulted Thomas, he answered quietly, "I think your heart has already decided." Indeed, my answer was becoming clear within me. Gaining experience at the investment bank while continuing to work with Hannah's organization. This might be my way of atonement. My mother supported my decision. It's your life. You don't need to make decisions for anyone else. I spoke with my father in the hospital garden. "I'm going to New York." After a long silence, he replied, "I want you to be happy." In those words, there was a mix of regret and hope. The preparations for my new life are steadily progressing. A year has passed since I started my new life in New York. My job at the investment bank has been more fulfilling than I anticipated. Working on projects in the microfinance department to support people facing financial difficulties holds a profound significance for me. "Felicia, could you lead the next project?" The trust from my manager, Brandon, has been steadily growing. On weekends, I continue to volunteer with Hannah's organization. The New York branch has been more successful than expected, with a continuous flow of people in need of support. "I'm so glad you're here." "One day," Hannah murmured quietly, "I couldn't have done this alone. I have monthly video calls with my father. His condition has stabilized, and he has started working at a small accounting office. I'm learning to appreciate each day," he said with a calmness that was once absent. "My mother is still studying to obtain her accountant's certification. It's never too late, is it?" she says proudly. Thomas also left his job in San Francisco and moved to New York. "I want to be by your side." His decision moved me deeply. I regularly have video calls with Julie's children. "Auntie Felicia, we're coming to visit you during summer vacation." I eagerly look forward to that promise. And above all, I have changed. The scars of the past may not have fully healed. However, I have gained the strength to move forward while carrying them. We can't change the past, but the future is in our hands. That phrase, I learned in counseling, continues to guide me. One winter night, I received an unexpected call. "Felicia." My father's voice was calmer than ever. "I've decided. I want to write a book about bipolar disorder and financial abuse. I want my experience to serve as a lesson for others." His proposal made me think deeply. My father's confession hinted at a new possibility. I want to help. The response came naturally to me. Hannah decided to join as well, turning it into a new family project. My mother also agreed to contribute a chapter titled, "Liberation from Codependency," sharing her own experiences. "This could be our way of atonement," Hannah said, and I nodded deeply in agreement. Thomas fully supported this plan. I believe that's the true path to recovery. Writing the book brought us new insights. Talking about the past sometimes comes with pain. However, through this process, we found ourselves gradually healing. Family renewal. That became the theme of the book. Afterward, my mother obtained her accountant's certification, and although my father continues with treatment, he is steadily moving forward. I want to live each day with integrity. There was a certain weight to my father's words. Hannah's support organization grew into a nationwide network. "This might be our mission," she reflected. As for me, I used my experience at the investment bank to contribute to the development of financial education programs. Thomas and I are planning our wedding for next spring. It will be a small ceremony, but those who matter most to us will be there. A new beginning for our family. When my mother said this, I was able to give her a genuine smile. Life may not go the way we envision, but sometimes those unexpected paths provide the most valuable lessons. Now, snow is quietly falling outside the window. The Manhattan skyline glows softly. This is not the end. It is the beginning of a new story.